Welcome, everybody. Today we have a very special guest.
I knew early on that I wanted to make movies.
Such a difficult industry because there's a lot of luck involved.
I mean, look at American Werewolf in London, look at The Thing, look at The Fly. Look at these films that have really withstood the test of time.
I sculpted this Captain Kirk mask, and they didn't sell particularly well, but then John Carpenter came in, said, can you paint one white and spray paint his hair black?
I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and it scared the living shit out of me.
You're just racking up these people that you grew up watching. They're in your films. Is that surreal?
There were 35 directors there. If there had been a bomb dropped on that restaurant, never another good horror movie.
Benet's Bloody Bits.
Hi, my name is Jason Benet, and welcome to Benet's Bloody Bits. Today we have a very special guest. She's a writer, director, producer, director. She kind of does a little bit of everything. Megan Tremethick, thank you for showing up today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And yay, you got my name right. So
thank God. Just so people know, I practiced about 5 times before I hit record to make sure I didn't mess up her name. So yeah. Thank you very much for showing up. And where are you from?
Originally, I'm from Falmouth in Cornwall, which is in the southwest of England. And then I just kind of came up to Scotland, and I've been here ever since.
So that would explain when it says your background Cornish?
Yeah, I'm Cornish.
So British and Scottish?
Well, I'm not Scottish myself. I just moved up here to work with Hex Studios.
Okay. So let's talk about, like, when you were growing up, did you always like acting? Did you want to get into film? What was kind of like your upbringing that made you... Did you want to get into this industry, or was it just kind of fell into it?
Well, when I was really young in like primary school, I was a pretty shy kid, and I kind of used theatre and like the school plays and things to come out of my shell a little bit and just kind of like don a character, if you will. And I guess I kind of got validation from that, and I just continued, and I just found a love with it. And then the more, like, the older I got, the more I kind of wanted more creative control with that, and to contribute more, and to try and like write my own stories and create my own like films and things like that.
So when you were in school, like high school, were you doing plays? Were you doing, auditioning for things?
Yeah. The first thing that I ever did was a talent show where I dressed up as a character from Cats the Musical, if you've heard of that, the Andrew Lloyd Webber thing. So I wore like full like makeup, crazy big wig, cat suit, and I was 9 years old, sang McCavity from Cats the Musical, and I loved it. And then I just did other school plays like that, and nativities and stuff like that.
Now, did you go like after school? Did you go to college? Did you do any kind of like film school or anything like that?
I did a sixth form course, which is about 3 years, and it was really intense mostly for acting. There was lots of acting and lots of singing and lots of dancing, actually, because I have a big love of musical theatre as well.
So it's kind of in your blood, because my daughter is only 13, and I thought she was going to get into sports like I did. But it seems like on stage, in front of cameras, theater, she's done a lot of shows. She did like Shrek and Wizard of Oz. So it's kind of like just you find your niche at a very young age. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of know. Like I always knew when I was younger, I wanted to talk about movies. You know what I mean? Like I just kind of knew. I think everybody has a power. Like everybody, you just need to find it and kind of pursue it. So it seems like you always knew what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I think I did. Like ever since I found more confidence, I've just kind of followed that path and just taken on more and more responsibility in different disciplines, but within creative acting and storytelling. And that's so cool. She did Shrek. Sorry.
Shrek, Wizard of Oz. She did, what was it, Matilda, and she did quite a few. And she hasn't branched out to like speaking lines. I think she's a little bit nervous, even though she's not afraid to be on stage. But that's kind of like the next journey. Done quite a few shows, but it's like you need to get some learn some lines. And, it's nice to be on stage and dancing, but it's nice also to be front and center. And it's kind of scary, but I think that's like, she hates practicing and all that. And it's tiring, but when the show's over, she's sad. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, oh, all that hard work, I get it. Now that the show's over, because the night of a show is kind of electric and you're running on adrenaline, and then you go home and you're like, oh, I want to do it again. And that's what kind of keeps her coming back. And I think a lot of actors are probably like that.
Absolutely. Actually, I can 100% relate to that because I did lots of outside of school theatre companies as well. That was kind of before I got into independent film. Like I started doing films when I was about 16, just like local short films and student films. But before that, I did loads of theatre productions, Amdram, and I was just in the chorus. I was in the back. Like I was way too shy to be taking any lead. I really had to work up to it for a good few years, and like I'm glad I got there in the end. But yeah, definitely it takes time to build on that.
From all these, did you get into doing short films first or films? How did you get to the next step in your journey?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I was about 17, one of the local schools was doing, it was the BFI Film Academy, and they were basically teaching a group of students how to make short films, like people like me that at the time just didn't have film experience, and they did like a kind of wide audition all over Cornwall for their leading parts. It was a short film called Chalk. And yeah, I think I was about 17. I was really nervous and I auditioned for that. And then I got a call back, and then I ended up getting the leading part, which for me was kind of game changing because I hadn't really gotten a lot of leading parts. So I think that was a big boost. And the shoot was so much fun. Like they took it very seriously, even though obviously people didn't have much experience, they treated it very professionally. And I thought it was great. Yeah, I learned a lot from that.
Because I noticed on your resume, some of the early stuff is like short films like Among Us, A Nightmare, Miss White, Balloon Animals.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that was the beginnings, but then from there, you really kind of jumped into like feature films. And,
yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I worked with Grace Fox. She's a lovely, she is Cornish as well. I think she's Cornish. No, she's from Bristol, but she shoots a lot of films in Cornwall. So I met Grace Fox and we did a few short films together. And yeah, she's great. And yeah, like I did a lot of films with the local university as well, Falmouth University, like student films there. And then I kind of worked up to finding local feature films, but still generally based in Cornwall, and did some of those. And that was kind of before I met Hex, and then everything kind of changed, and then I moved up to Scotland. Yeah.
So tell us about Hex Studios. What can you say about them?
Gosh, well, Hex Studios is a group of Scottish filmmakers, although we're pretty multicultural. We have like Irish people, Cornish, that's me. And yeah, we all make commercial feature films, and we do it. I can't say too much.
I understand, yeah.
A few things we need to announce, to be honest. But yeah, we basically have like a church that we work in, and we build sets, and we make our feature films. Yeah.
So Hex Studios. It sounds like it leans on the genre side, horror, fantasy. Would you say that would be the focus?
Yeah. Like we're mostly a horror studio, but we have made a lot of fantasy films lately, just kind of by coincidence in a way. Yeah, and also I love the background that you have. By the way, that's so cool. I love the plug for the Slave of the Sorcerer. Yay, thanks.
I had a couple that I was looking at, but the artwork to this kind of screamed, the king of all these films, kind of Conan the Barbarian. I was like, this is colorful, and it was an easy choice. Once I saw it, I was like, I'm using that one.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. The Slave of the Sorcerer is based on Conan the Barbarian, of course. Also based on the Sword of the Sorcerer, Deathstalker. If you've seen that film, that's a lot
I have. I've seen the second one too. I think it was directed by Jim Wynorski, which is kind of even more camp. I think it's purposely supposed to be camp.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so
sorry.
no, it's that subgenre has really, you guys are kind of bringing it back, because the 80s or some parts of the 90s, it was really huge with Conan, the Sword and the Sorcerer, and the Beastmaster, Don Coscarelli film. Was that a point that Hex Studios was trying to make, that look, we kind of want to bring back this retro style of film that seems to have kind of been forgotten about?
Yeah, 100%. We're all huge fans of those films. Also, Flash Gordon, even though it's a space opera, I love Flash Gordon, and it
Oh
feels
yeah,
it's
very, and I'm a huge Queen fan, and they did the soundtrack, so it's got the whole cinematic, widescreen kind of, and it's very camp as well too.
Yeah, for sure. So we're big fans of all of those films, and yeah, like there weren't a lot. Well, there were like no sword and sorcery films that were coming up, and actually now a few more have come out, which is really exciting that they're also bringing sword and sorcery about. So it's great, and hopefully we'll be doing a sequel. So that'd be awesome.
Now, is The Slave and the Sorcerer complete? Is it done film festivals? When and where can people see it?
People can get it on Blu-ray, or they can get a digital download. It's currently on BackaKit, which is kind of like adjacent to Kickstarter. I can give you links. People check it out.
So that was a Kickstarter project?
Yeah, we funded it on Kickstarter. We'd shot some of the movie already, and then we raised funds to complete the movie, and we also obviously sold Blu-rays on the Kickstarter and things like that.
And that's done very well for you. I know some people, they put out those campaigns, some do well, some don't, but it seems like you guys haven't had a problem getting people to back you, which is a good thing.
Yeah, we're very lucky, very, very grateful to all the lovely people that support us.
Now, I wanted to discuss some of these horror films, like you did the Lockdown Hauntings, Werewolf Castle. Were those movies you wanted to do? Did you want to start doing horror films, or did they just kind of come your way?
Oh, no, of course. Like, I'm a huge horror fan. I've kind of always been a huge horror fan. And I always like creepy things. I always like creepy films. And the horror has always felt like home to me. I also have a love of kind of like campy horror films too. That's why things like Werewolf Castle are always a lot of fun. It was also great to do something quite different, as the Lockdown Hauntings was. It was like in COVID times, where obviously things are very different, and it was very centered around COVID, like a cultural phenomenon. So it was a really interesting kind of unique film to shoot.
Like, if you had to pick your favorite kind of films within the genre, was there a certain era? Was it more gothic? Was it more Barbara Steele, Mario Bava, or what? If you're at home and you're just, I want to watch some movies, what are the things that you're sitting down to view?
Oh, that's really tough. Like, I'm a huge Dario Argento fan. I would happily have a Giallo night, watch all of them. I love like Tenebra, Deep Red.
Yeah.
I actually, my first short film was heavily inspired by particularly Tenebra, but a lot of Dario Argento's work, because I just think he's awesome. But then I also love Gothic horror. I also love, like, obviously Hammer horror, Amicus Productions. I absolutely love AIP as well. Love some Vincent Price, like doing some Edgar Allan. But I also love like 70s ghost stories and things like that, like haunted house films, particularly from the 70s. I think are just amazing. So I'd say I'm pretty diverse in terms of the horror I like to consume.
It sounds like 60s through 80s seems to be your sweet spot, which is a lot of people's, regardless of age. I mean, I'm a little bit older, so I grew up with the Argentos and Lucio Fulci and these guys. But I find that even like people that are 15 years old are watching these same films. So it's very interesting how everything comes back to, and that's not to say the new movies aren't good. They are. It's just everybody kind of goes back to this era. I'm not sure what it is, if it's the the style, the editing, the kind of like freewheeling violence and erotica. It just was a different time.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And there's also, I think, performances were very charismatic as well back then, so you could really kind of get sucked into the characters, and there was a lot of fun that maybe isn't always had as much in modern films. But saying that, I do have an absolute love of kind of 90s, early 2000s J horror films.
Oh yeah.
So I do love that as well. And I do like a lot of modern horror. I think I just tend to compare them to older films that I hold so dearly, and I'll try and hold them to the same standard. And so if I do think they're as good, then of course I'll love modern horror too. But I just feel like I'm sometimes a bit less impressed by some of them, but still.
Going back to Hex Studios, what is the correlation with Hex Studios and Amicus Studios? Are they separate? Or are you guys trying to be the modern day version? What is, I think I've heard Amicus brought up in your work as well as Hex Studios.
Yeah, so we're going to be reviving Amicus Productions, obviously in collaboration with the Subotsky estate. Milton Subotsky of Amicus Productions, his family. So yeah, we basically have permission to revive Amicus, and we're going to be creating anthologies inspired by Amicus Productions, and we're going to stay very true to how they originally were, at least to start with. But I think we kind of always will, because that's what we love. Like, Amicus is very dear to all of our hearts, and we want to revive it in the way that we think would be true to the company.
So will Hex fall underneath the Amicus umbrella? Or are they going to be just two different studios, or?
I believe we're going to keep it as two different studios. It's just that, so it's kind of like Hex will be the more bold kind of experimental horror films, which wouldn't fit Amicus Productions, but anything that is specifically an Amicus film will be kept as Amicus Productions, just because we feel like there's a really specific mold for an Amicus film, especially as it's an anthology, a certain type of horror. So we wouldn't want to kind of muddy it by merging them too much, if you know what I mean.
So you wear many different hats within Hex and Amicus. Are you going to write, direct? I mean, I know you're going to be in a lot of these films, so that must be exciting for you. It's like you almost don't even know where to start, which is a great thing. There's a lot going on. Yeah,
no, it is really exciting. I mean, with Amicus, I would be a bit scared to touch it in terms of writing and directing myself. I'm going to leave that to other people. But I am there to support them in all other ways. And obviously, yeah, I'll be acting in the first Amicus film, which I'm beyond thrilled about, because I used to watch Amicus films with my dad when I was so young, and I just adored them. So it's quite crazy to think that I'll be acting in the first Amicus film in over 20 years. So it's a dream.
When can you announce the first Amicus film? I'm assuming it's not just yet. You probably have to wait a little bit.
Well, it has technically been announced. We've actually done a Kickstarter campaign for the first Amicus film. It's called In the Grip of Terror, and there's a kind of medical horror theme to the first film. So it will be set around an old kind of 70s style. Well, it's quite an anachronistic style we're going for, so it's going to kind of borrow from different eras, but generally around the 70s. It'll be set in this hospital, and each segment in some way will feature a medical theme.
So going back to Gialli films, and you directed a short, which the artwork is very much Dario Argento. Can you talk about that short film that you made?
Yeah, so, oh my gosh. So a few years before I ended up shooting it, I had this idea for a short film, and I was desperate to make it, and I was very close to actually shooting it with a completely different crew. And then things happened and it just didn't work out. And so I had to kind of put it back on the shelf. And then when I kind of ended up working at Hex, I took it back off the shelf, I guess. And then I looked at it and I thought, I kind of want to change it up. And I don't know, I felt like I'd learned a lot more and I wanted to work on it. And so because I'd recently been introduced to Dario Argento films, I wanted to put that spin on the film. And so I actually completely rewrote the script and made it inspired by Giallo films. And I love it so much more now. Yeah. So I'm really glad that I waited and came back to it.
Now that one's called Slot, correct?
Yeah.
Is that available to watch?
It's not just yet. It's going to be part of a horror anthology by Hex called For We Are Many Too. Yeah, actually 3 of my short films are going to be released as part of that anthology, which is really exciting.
Now, what about, like, you did a film called Trauma Therapy Psychosis, the Vance Institute. Are those part of Hex, or are they separate pieces of work?
The Vance Institute is, yeah, it's a Hex film. Trauma Therapy Psychosis is, it's kind of, it's technically by a different company. Yeah.
So you've got a lot of things going on, but I know the big Kickstarter you have going on is for a brand new film. Can you tell us about that one?
I'm like, which one?
Okay, is that Black Chariot?
Yeah. Yeah, so Black Chariot is set in the 1950s. It's inspired by film noirs. It's almost like a little bit like starts like Reservoir Dogs a little bit, but meets something like Carnival of Souls. So it's quite an unusual film, but it's also very Hitchcockian as well. Yeah, it's about these 3 kind of young rogues, little like urchins, and they have Lawrence Harvey of the Human Centipede, who is kind of like their ringleader, and they're robbing a bank, and it doesn't go well.
Now that one's currently Kickstarter. People, there's perks. People can look at what is the name of the Kickstarter where they can donate if they'd like to?
So it's just called Black Chariot on Kickstarter. Yeah.
And I will find a link for that, and I will put it in the description of the video when I upload it, so people can have like a direct link to it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
I'm not familiar with Kickstarter. Is there like a certain window of like how long that it can be up? Like, is it 30 days, 3 months? How does that work?
Well, it kind of changes actually. Well, so you normally would do 4 months for 4 weeks for a campaign, but this current Kickstarter is a 3-week campaign. Although it's fairly up to the person who's doing the campaign about how long they want to do it for. But also there is a new feature on Kickstarter which is really good, and it means that you can accept late pledges. So if the 30 days say is up and that campaign is allowing late pledges, then people can still back it if they haven't backed it before. I feel like, does that make sense?
Yeah, that way that you can still have the money flow in. Now,
Yeah.
with Kickstarter, let's say if your goal is 100,000 and you make 80, do you still get the 80, or does it? How does that?
Kickstarter does take a percentage, yeah, but
Yep.
it's, I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it's not terrible, you know.
And that makes sense because they want to make their cut, so they do get a percentage. But it's great at the time. You couldn't do this 30 years ago because the computers and the technology, you weren't even like, this wasn't even in anybody's thoughts to be able to raise money for a film. So it's nice that people can have perks, and I'm assuming eventually there'll be a Blu-ray release, and that's probably one of the perks, or maybe get a producer's credit on the film.
No, for sure. And yeah, it's definitely really awesome of Kickstarter to allow people to do late pledges. Like, for example, my debut feature film, which I'll be making, spoiling you, recently had a Kickstarter just before Black Chariot, actually, and I've left the late pledges on, and I'm really grateful to people, but I have received pledges after, which is, it's amazing. And so that may well happen with Black Chariot as well.
Can you speak of anything beyond Black Chariot, that acting, directing, producing, that you might be able to give us a little tease about?
Well,
Without getting in trouble?
Well, after we'll be shooting the rest of Black Chariot, my main focus will be on my feature film Spoiling You for a little while, because obviously I'm directing in it. I'm also playing one of the leading characters, and I'll be writing it with the help of Lawrie Brewster as well. But I got the bulk of it to do, so yeah, it's really, really exciting. But I really want to make sure that I get it right, you know, and stay true to my inspirations. So that's what I'll be focusing on.
What are some of the films, horror films, genre films that came out this year that you really liked? Have you caught anything? Cinemas, home video, VOD, something that you kind of like really thought was, even if it's just one film that was well done?
You mean like a modern one?
Yeah, something in the last couple of years, you know, something that like a.
I really enjoyed Pearl, actually. I thought Pearl was really interesting, and I felt like it had great drama. Mia Goth did an excellent performance, and it had creepy psychological horror elements. So I really like that one. I haven't seen Maxine yet, so I'll have to check that one out because I'm quite curious. It's sort of, I've heard mixed things about it, but I hope it's good.
Yeah, I haven't caught Maxine yet. Pearl's kind of this interesting, going back to Wizard of Oz. It definitely feels like, and I think that was on purpose. Ty West did that, but it's completely different than X and Maxine, which is kind of cool. And they actually made that movie right after X, not realizing that X was going to do well, pretty much using the same sets, which I thought was very cool.
Yeah, I can't imagine them. Well, actually, saying that, I can imagine shooting 2 movies at the same time, because Hex, we actually shot like 3 feature films each month, like a month apart or something. It was crazy. But yeah, so actually saying that, yeah, it's kind of wild that they did that, and it worked out for the better for them, for sure, because both films are awesome.
Can you talk about the power of social media? I know I've seen you, I believe you're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. How important is it in this age to get your projects and work out to the world with social media? I know some people don't use all the formats, and I think you kind of have to. It's kind of a missed opportunity not to take advantage of them because they don't cost you anything.
Yeah, no, I would say, yeah, it's very important, at least for me. Like, I've kind of noticed, I feel like, I mean, in a very small way, I feel like my life's changed a little bit from working on social media and kind of, and working on that. Personally, I think you don't have to be on all platforms. If anything, I would suggest stick to one and have it, like, work it so it's really strong, if you know what I mean. Like, I've tried other platforms and I've sort of dabbled with them, but for me, like, Instagram is my favorite. I enjoy posting on there the most, and yeah, I'd suggest stick to one personally.
Yeah, it's weird how the rules seem to be different. You can follow the same people on all 4, yet everybody acts differently. It's very odd at times, you know, because I'll follow the same people. Sometimes they'll follow me back, but the way people act, like Twitter is very much people telling you that you're wrong and they're right. Where TikTok is, you know, very quick bites and sound edits, and it's very kind of overwhelming. And I kind of agree. Instagram seems to be the best of all the different worlds. It kind of, it's video, but it's still pictures, but you can interact and it doesn't seem overwhelming. If I had to pick one, YouTube and Instagram seem the ones that I have the most comfort with.
Nice. Yeah, like I've not tried YouTube, but I think YouTube probably has more power than Instagram, actually, if you can get it right. So no, good for you, definitely. Like,
yeah, YouTube is, I don't think it's going to go anywhere, knock on wood. I mean, it just seems to be kind of the present and future of kind of, you know, I kind of didn't want to do a channel for the longest time because I was old school and I just wanted to write for magazines and stuff. But I realized more people are going to see your stuff on YouTube, and it's in a video form, and it's kind of, it's not a phone interview that you have to transcribe it. So this is much better, to be honest with you. Somebody that's been doing this for a little while, it's you feel like you have it forever. Save it to the, you know, save it on your computer, back it up. But this is better. It's a visual, you know, it's something I couldn't have done, you know, a decade or 2 ago. wasn't sure about it. But now it's like, it's kind of like a drug. It's kind of addicting, you know?
Yeah, no, that's so cool. I will say there's a kind of magic though for writing in especially like magazines and traditional print. I just think that is so magical, and I hope it doesn't, you know, go out of fashion too much, because I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think, when I stepped into YouTube, I realized that there's Fangoria and there's Rue Morgue and there's Delirium, which I write for, but they're not bringing in the numbers that they did, you know, years ago. Because, I mean, who
Right.
buys you know, nobody really buys newspapers. They usually turn on their phone when they wake up, and that's how they get their instant news. So, yeah, I think they'll always be around for connoisseurs of that like physical media in that sense. But I think it's a harder sell for magazines than, let's say, you know, digital and stuff like that. But speaking of social media, where can people find you online if they want to follow your work and keep up to date on all your projects?
Well, I have Instagram, just Megan Tremethick. I do have TikTok. It's a bit less, it's a bit more bare bones. Just Instagram. I'm also on Twitter, which I'm fairly active, even though I tend to just retweet things and say thank you for your support. But I'm trying to be a bit more active. So yeah, I would say Instagram and Twitter are the best options.
Well, thank you for taking a part of your day to come by and talk to me. You're very welcome to come back in the future if you have any updates or new projects, and I'd love to have you back, and I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it was so nice to meet you and chat to you.
Thank you very much. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.